Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Shred Show Live with me, your host, Josh Pitts. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got a guest. I'm shaking. I'm humbled. I'm honored. This is one of those guys I don't get starstruck very often, but this is somebody that since the beginning of my career in the mortgage industry, he has been one of the most quoted, one of the most referenced people in our entire mortgage industry. We have Rick Sharga joining us this morning. We're talking about a tsunami that's coming. You're not going to want to miss it. Ladies and gentlemen, audio up. It's time to shred. Rick, I cannot tell you, I'm literally like shaking this morning because you are one of those people. For me, it is one, again, I have known your name. I've seen you from afar, but having you on the show this morning is a humbling opportunity. It's an honor. So thank you so much for joining us this morning on the Shred Show.
I'm just happy to be here. I hope I can keep up with your energy level because your show is not only live but live wire. You're doing a great job with this thing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I'll bring the energy. You bring the knowledge and expertise because that's where you come from with your background in the industry. And Rick, that's where I want to start. I mean, you've had a 20+ year career in this industry. You've seen ups, you've seen downs. And for those who may not, just for the slight chance that nobody has heard your name before in the industry, kind of give a little background on yourself, and then we'll jump into a few other things. But tell us about Rick Sharga and you in the industry.
Well, okay. The fact of the matter is I'm kind of an accidental tourist in the mortgage and real estate industries. I spent the first half of my career really doing marketing work for technology companies. And then the dot-com bubble burst and suddenly technology companies weren't doing any marketing. So I started a little consulting business with a few people from the company that I had been working with that went out of business. And kind of shuffled around doing that for about a year when I landed this little client. It was a startup in California that was using the internet to push out information about bank-owned properties to realtors. And there was a new CEO on board, and he decided that there was an opportunity to take this thing national and to target real estate investors in addition to agents, because everybody was interested in foreclosure properties. And this little startup company was this thing called RealtyTrack. After consulting with them for about a year, I came on board for what was supposed to be a 6-month engagement to get the brand launched and get the company up and running. And while I was there, the foreclosure crisis hit. And the CEO asked me as a personal favor if I could handle the press activities until we came up with a more permanent solution. And that 6-month engagement turned out to be almost 10 years.
Wow.
And you talked about being the most quoted person in the industry, and for a better part of a decade, I probably was, but it wasn't because I was that good or that smart. It was because we were the only people willing to talk about what was really happening in terms of foreclosures. The other people that had been tracking it all really had a vested interest in not making the information more public, just because of the nature of foreclosures and people losing their homes. So, from talking about foreclosures, as RealtyTrack's data business grew, I started talking about more things having to do with mortgages and housing. And I left RealtyTrack in 2011. I got recruited to join a company called Carrington Mortgage Holdings. And that was kind of my MBA, if you will, in the origination business, in the servicing business, in the title business, because Carrington owned and operated companies in all those areas. And then I got recruited to go to auction.com, and I was there for 5 years. And that was kind of I thought it was going to be the peak of my career because it married the two halves of my career. It was a technology company that was trying to bring online sales using technology into an industry that desperately needed to be shaken up a bit, the real estate industry. And I was there for 5 years. We rebranded the company as 10X, split off the commercial business, sold it to a private equity firm. And I was off consulting again when ironically the same guy who recruited me to leave RealtyTrack recruited me to come back. There's a new ownership in place. They found RealtyTrack brand, and they thought it was something that the company, which is now called Atom Data Solutions, could leverage a little bit more. And they thought the timing with COVID was appropriate because RealtyTrack was known as a foreclosure database, foreclosure website. and there's a likelihood we're going to see more foreclosures in the next couple of years. So sorry for the long ramble about my personal life, but that's basically the career path that accidentally got me back to RealtyTrack in time for the next wave of foreclosure activity.
Which is what we're going to be talking about. So RealtyTrack, real quick. I mean, I actually appreciate you sharing your background because, again, somebody who's watched from afar, somebody who's heard your name so many times, like it's so cool to hear your background. But now you've come back to RealtyTrack. You took a hiatus. You had some other, other projects and things you were working on, but now you're back with RealtyTrack. Why the return to RealtyTrack? Why is now the best time more than ever?
Well, a couple things. One, I really felt like we had some unfinished business last time. The size of the foreclosure tsunami last time really rocked the company, and not in a good way. Our data costs collecting foreclosure information went up by about 400%. And there were so many foreclosures and so little buying activity going on from home buyers or investors that nobody wanted to pay for a subscription to a site because they could just knock on their neighbor's door and have a 20% chance of that person to be in foreclosure. So we really never got to take RealtyTrack to the next level, and that's really what my vision is, and it's shared by the management at Adam and my RealtyTrack colleagues. We want to take RealtyTrack, reestablish it as the go-to source for foreclosure information, but we want to build on that and make it a broader and more robust solution for real estate investors and real estate agents who are looking for all kind of real estate investment opportunities, not just foreclosures, but vacant properties and probate and estate and tax liens and so forth and so on. So we're getting ready to launch a brand new version of RealtyTrack in March. Nice. And over the next year, we'll start to add some of those other types of investment opportunities and more feature sets and functionality. And I'm excited about it. It's I think a great way to kind of go back to the future and finish the job we started back in the early part of the 2000s.
I love it. Guys, you're going to have to stay tuned. It sounds like, Rick, you guys got some big things coming from RealtyTrack, so you guys are going to have to stay tuned. Hopefully we can share them here on Shred. Now, let's talk about, this is the discussion everybody's having. There is a government moratoria going on. There's so much talk of foreclosure. There's forbearance. But so kind of break this down for everybody watching, whether a mortgage professional, whether a real estate professional, consumer. I mean, do you think we are approaching a time back to the 08, 09 crash? Do you think, are we expecting that? Should we expect that? What's going on with our industry right now?
There's a lot of uncertainty in the industry, and look, there's no question at all that there's a backlog of foreclosures building up. And the longer the government extends the forbearance program, the longer the government extends the foreclosure moratorium, the higher that backlog is going to get. That said, we are not almost under any circumstances going to go back to 2008, 2009. That was, I hope, a once-in-a-lifetime situation. It was caused by bad lending. When the and there were borrowers. There was a story of I live in Southern California. There was a story of a local woman who was a house cleaner making about $40,000 a year, and she had mortgages on 8 houses in her city.
What?
Yeah, and these were no money down, teaser rates. There's just no way that the industry today would have approved this borrower for those kind of loans. So Dodd-Frank, as much as I was kind of skeptical about it in the beginning, the rules, the ability to repay rules, the QM rules that came into place really kept a lot of bad loans from entering the system. So when the pandemic hit, there were about 250,000 loans in foreclosure. That sounds like a lot, but it's 0.5% of all active loans. And normally, any given year, you're looking at about 1% of loans being in foreclosure. So the loan performance was twice as good as it had been historically when we hit the pandemic. The forbearance program, in my mind, is doing exactly what it was intended to do. It's giving borrowers whose income has been affected by COVID the opportunity to kind of weather the storm, get back on their feet. And if you look at the numbers coming out of the MBA, as people have exited forbearance from last June through the end of December, 87% of them have exited successfully. So that means 20% of them never stopped paying their loan, even though they were in forbearance, which is remarkable. Yeah. And those people entered the program probably just to hedge their bets, just in case something happened, but they kept paying their loan. But they've either continued paying their loan, they've had their loans reinstated, they've entered into a repayment plan, they've had their missed payments deferred to the end of their loan, which is the preferred solution for any government-backed loan. They've entered into a loan modification program, or somewhere between 5 and 10% have actually paid off the loan balance. And
Wow.
they've typically done that either by selling the property or refinancing. So again, 87% have left the program successfully. It's the other 13% who've left without a plan in place that are the ones to probably worry about. And if you look at the fact that there's about 2.5 million people still in the forbearance program, most of whom will be exiting during the spring. If those numbers hold up, that means you have about 325,000 people who will exit without a plan in place. If you add that to the 250,000 loans that were in foreclosure before the pandemic, you get up to about 575,000 potential foreclosures. And that takes you all the way up to 1.15%. So it's twice where we were before the pandemic hit,
Sure.
but it's about a quarter as big as it was at the peak of the last recession. So we got up to 4% of loans in foreclosure back then, which was unprecedented. And this time, I wouldn't be surprised if we got up to 1.5%, maybe 2% at the outside, depending on how the economy recovers. But again, nowhere near where we were last time. And by the way, it's going to hit in dribs and drabs. It's not going to all hit at once.
It's not going to be the tsunami that was in 08 and 9 when that hit. It was just like a flood. Like everybody was just completely overwhelmed. So we're going to see this in smaller increments in this one.
Yeah, I mean, look at it this way: a borrower can be in forbearance for up to 360 days. If you missed a year's worth of payments in the past, you were either in foreclosure, you were about to be in foreclosure, or you'd already lost your house. Those were your options. Today, you miss your payments for a year. The day after that, you're current, as long as you enter into a plan with your mortgage servicer.
Huh.
So you go from 360 days past due to current overnight. Let's say those people shouldn't have gotten current. They're going to default anyway. That means they have to miss another 3 to 4 months payments before they get that default notice. So if you exit the program at the end of March and you're current and you ultimately default, that means you're not going to default till the end of June, end of July. And then each state's laws are different. So how long it takes to go through the foreclosure will be different. So California might take a year, Texas might take 3 months, New York might take 3 years. So you're going to see this all hit in different waves. And the other big difference, Josh, is last time home prices fell 35% nationwide. States like California, Florida, Las Vegas, Arizona, 60% drop in price. Right now, homeowners have a record level of equity, about $6.5 trillion. Adams data reports that 70% of homeowners have 20% equity. So if you're a distressed homeowner in this environment and you get that first foreclosure notice, that first notice of default, you have options that that homeowner didn't have 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, rather. You have the option of selling your house probably at a profit because the demand for housing is so strong and the inventory is so low. That there's a really good chance that you'll be able to sell that house instead of losing it to foreclosure. So even if you enter foreclosure, the likelihood of you losing it at that foreclosure auction is a lot lower than it was 10 years ago.
Okay, so I have two things I want to build off here. I want to start here. Is this forbearance, or are these programs giving the consumer a false sense of security? Because again, like you said, for the most part, lenders have set in place like, oh yeah. And like you said, most of them have some type of plan set in place. But if they go, 360 or 360 days, and then they have those extra couple of months, are people getting comfortable with not making that payment and then ultimately could end up worse for them? What are your thoughts there?
You can never go wrong underestimating human nature. I think P.T. Barnum said something like that. I'll be nicer. There are probably people in the program who think that this is going to go on indefinitely. They're never going to have to make a payment again. And those are the people who will lose their homes to foreclosure.
Sure.
Do I suspect that's most of the people in the program? No. In fact, Lending Tree did a survey at the beginning of the program where they came away with the conclusion that 70% of the people in the program didn't really need to be in forbearance. They were either hedging their bets, or some of them were just savvy enough, and this always happens. They saw a government program that would allow them not to have to spend $1,500, $2,500, $3,000 a month on a mortgage. So they could either use it to build up their savings, to pay off other bills, to invest differently. So I'm still cautiously optimistic that as people leave, they will not go into default in large numbers. There will be a certain number that just kind of whiff on this and figure that forbearance will go on indefinitely. I think it becomes a fairly small percentage of the overall pool.
Interesting. So now to my second part of this question, you have these consumers with large amounts of equity. And of course, we're talking to a large amount of the mortgage professionals, real estate professionals on the show. How can mortgage and real estate professionals really help consumers either leverage what they have now, if they're in forbearance? How do they help prepare them? Because I mean, that's honestly what all our mortgage professionals are waiting for. Like, okay, so now we're in these times. How do we ultimately not take advantage, but how do we help benefit the consumer out of all this data?
Well, let me start with the easy one first, and then I'll get back to the more challenging one.
Sure.
If you're a realtor in this market, you should be paying close attention to anybody who gets that first notice of foreclosure. I should point out there's a weak link in this rosy story that I'm spinning for you, which is the FHA borrower.
Okay.
So the FHA borrower typically has very low cash reserves, typically has gotten a loan with a really low down payment. So they may not have built up enough equity to really exit successfully. So if I'm a realtor, I'm looking at two things early on. One is I'm brushing up on my short sale skills, learning how to negotiate with the lender to execute a short sale on behalf of a distressed homeowner. And the other is I'm kind of brushing up on my human relations skills, because I want to reach out to those distressed homeowners and walk them through the process. You're in California. Here's what's going to happen in 90 days if you don't remedy this deficiency. You're going to wind up getting a notice of sale, and 30 days from then they're going to auction your house off and you're going to lose everything. Why don't we work together to tap into the equity in your house? And even if we have to sell at a slight discount compared to full market price, I'm going to bet you can walk away with a 10% profit and get restarted and resuscitate your credit and so forth. So that, to me, that's a win-win-win. You get the borrower who's in distress, who avoids a foreclosure and can start fresh. You get a realtor who's able to make that sale, and you get a buyer who's looking for a house and is able to get in. And maybe it's a first-time buyer who couldn't find a property they could afford somewhere else, or maybe it's a real estate investor. But that's what I would be doing if I were a realtor. I'd be looking at those two things. The more challenging side's on the mortgage side. And the reason it's a challenge is I mentioned there's 2.5 people in the forbearance program, and I mentioned that I believe most of them are going to exit successfully.
Sure.
The problem is most of them are scheduled to exit in the next couple months. That's going to put an enormous strain on mortgage servicing. And I do know mortgage servicers are staffing up right now. The mortgage companies that do both origination and servicing are cross-training some of their origination people to help out when the flood of people comes in that's trying to work out some sort of modification or repayment program. And that's really the challenge. So for the mortgage industry, it's almost more important to make sure your employees, your customer-facing employees, are trained and understand all the options they can present to these borrowers. It's also probably important to take inventory of the kind of loan modification tools that you're comfortable providing. Most of these borrowers are not sitting with loans that have 2.5% interest rates or 2.7 or 2.8% interest rates. So in a lot of cases, you might be able to modify a loan for a customer who used to be a perfect customer, making all their payments on time, but fell into a problem because of COVID, by kind of getting back to them with a lower interest rate that reduces their monthly payments on a go-forward basis. So it's incumbent on the industry to make sure all of its customer-facing representatives are completely schooled in what options are available, know the different options that are available for different types of loans. FHA has its own programs for loss mitigation. Fannie and Freddie have their own programs. What's available through the VA and USDA and all of those loans, in addition to the loans that are on private portfolios. So I do think there's an opportunity for refi to get out of these problems. There's going to be a lot of opportunities, and I think we'll see more and more of them for loan modifications that get these borrowers back on their feet. And the good news is I don't believe this is going to be a protracted recession like we had during the Great Recession, that it's going to take us a decade or more to work our way out. I think once this pandemic is under control, you're going to see the economy recover pretty rapidly, which again gets everything more or less back to normal in a reasonable period of time. So I'm not giving you any short answers today. I apologize for that.
No, but that's just it, Rick. You're that guy. You have I just am like eating this up, and I hope everybody listening, you are as well, because you're giving some options. And I think everything that I'm hearing, Rick, is as a mortgage professional, as a real estate professional, whatever profession you're in within this industry, you need to get your knowledge. You need to start getting ready now so you can present options to your consumers. And I even have people comment, like Danny Fees commenting out of Las Vegas, who's a real estate agent down there. Brush up, guys, on some of these like short sales. I didn't even think about that, Rick. Like, you should start brushing up on some of these skills, some of those things that we haven't thought of in years and years and years. Now it's time to come back and start educating yourself. So when borrowers are coming to you, because again, you're putting out content like we talk about, you're trying to stay in front of your consumer, you're trying to build your audience, and now it's time for you to really add value to them. And now it's time to come out and do what Rick is telling you, to start brushing up, get educated on these processes so you can ultimately go help the consumer. But then we have first-time homebuyers commenting on here as well. Like, this is good for me to know. This is something good for us to see what's coming, to what to expect as a buyer as well. So no, Rick, I love these answers, because ultimately that's what the Shred Show is all about. Adding value to everybody who's here, mortgage professional, real estate professional, or consumer. We bring as much value as possible. So I think this is really good. And Rick, I can't thank you enough for sharing some of this stuff. So let's talk about next 6 months, next 12 months, because all that we've been sharing, and like you said, this is going to come more in stages than anything. A lot of these people are expecting spring when the forbearance, a lot of these programs are going to be ending. So next 6 months, what's actionable items for everybody listening today? What should you be expecting? What should you be doing right now for the next 6 months to prepare for what's to come?
Well, I'm going to put a big asterisk on what you just said and what I'm about to say. Got to watch what President Biden does and what the Congress does. In President Biden's first stimulus proposal, one of the proposals was to continue the eviction ban and the foreclosure bans through the end of September, which would change all the math pretty significantly. And I understand the eviction part of it. I don't really think there's a logical reason to extend the foreclosure moratoria that long, but we'll see what happens. So right now, he's asked everybody to hold off till the end of March. So that's your new deadline. The forbearance program deadline for applying for forbearance was supposed to end December 31st. I wouldn't be shocked if that reopened for a bit. But right now, you could theoretically have people trickling out of forbearance all the way through the end of 2021. So you want to be watching the news for any further extensions on these. You also want to watch state law changes, because we've seen a number of states who have agreed to accelerate foreclosures on vacant and abandoned properties. And that makes great sense for everybody. The worst thing you can have typically is an abandoned house in a neighborhood. It's a safety hazard. It's an eyesore. And in a pandemic, it's even worse, because you don't know who's going to wind up in that house and if they're going to be infected and start to be, that could become a super spreader location.
Sure.
So be watching for government news first and foremost. There are a couple other things that are going to affect demand. I mean, watch for interest rate fluctuations as the government spends trillions more dollars to combat the pandemic. At some point, interest rates are going to be affected by that. You're probably going to see some things go up. The other thing you want to watch for, if you're either an investor or you're looking to buy a property, you're an agent, even if you're a lender looking for potential problem areas, I mentioned the rental eviction ban. That's a real problem for landlords, for investors who own rental properties. And there's this misnomer that landlords are, big corporate entities, or they're institutional investors. And that's been a bad rumor for the last 10 years. It's not really true. If you look at Blackstone and all the other institutional investors, they own about 2% of the single family rental stock. Over 90% is owned by mom and pop investors who own between 1 and 10 properties.
Wow.
They also have leveraged to buy those properties. They're paying mortgages on their on every month on the properties they purchased. If their tenants don't have to pay them, and they can't evict the tenant and replace the tenant with somebody who can pay them, at some point that model breaks, and your landlords wind up either having to sell properties at a distressed price, declare bankruptcy, go to foreclosure. So the rental market, particularly the small investor-owned rental market, really needs some government backstopping, or we're going to start to see some distress activity happening there. So those are a couple things to be watching.
I say I've heard so much talk of this, and now you bringing it these are discussions we should be having, because I don't think, because again, this affects our consumers, our buyer, because you're like 90% of these mom and pop shops, they're the ones who, the building that I'm sitting in, I pay a landlord, and this is going to affect those. And I know him personally, and I know he's not a huge entity. He doesn't have billions of dollars in reserves. He's just another guy like you and I who's made some commercial purchases. So that affects the consumer as well. So these
these rules are all well intended. They really are. And there's always unintended consequences, but trying to protect the consumer here. What happens if the landlord loses the property to foreclosure? Is the tenant safe in that property? Or now that the landlord is no longer there, is the tenant exposed? So there's all sorts of and the other, for that landlord, you couldn't pay me to buy a rental property in California today, because there's now a law that they're trying to pass that would preclude a landlord trying to collect back rent for a year after the pandemic. And then they can't demand the rent. They'd have to take the borrower to small claims court. Well, at that point, landlord's never going to get any of that money.
I was going to say.
And so, you're going to see a lot of bankruptcies for landlords if these kind of laws come into play. Again, they're trying to protect the consumer. I get that. And the lowest wage earners among the consumer population are the ones who are suffering the most right now and having the hardest time paying rent. But I think, again, if you're going to backstop the consumer, do it in a way that pays their rent, but make sure that landlord is the one getting the rent so they can pay their bills too.
Lots of things to think about, Rick. You're bringing up so many questions, and now I'm thinking we're going to have you back on the show talking about so much more. But guys, this is what we try to do here right at Shred. We do our best to bring you the most valuable information so you can ultimately make a very educated decision for your consumer. That's what we're all about. We're trying to help you. And Rick, you have been absolutely brilliant. We've gone over our time with you. I apologize. We've taken more of your time than we expected. But ladies and gentlemen, this is brilliant information. We're going to have Rick back on the show. We're going to be sharing more the things that you need to be updated on, and the things that you need to know to ultimately help your business grow, to help your consumers. That's what we're all in it for. We've all been in this industry long enough that we're in it for the consumer. We want to see our industry thrive. We want to see it flourish. And it's with great information like this that we continue to do it with. So Rick, I want to thank you so much. You are absolutely brilliant, my friend. I finally have come down off my shakes a little bit that I'm like, oh, Rick Sharga, you love the show with me. But so I want to thank you again for taking your time, sharing your expertise, sharing your knowledge. And again, out of all this, we need to be paying attention to what's going on. We need to be more educated. We need to be more informed. And it's great people like you and RealtyTrack that are helping us keep informed. So Rick, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And, anybody who's interested, follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn. And I post this kind of stuff all the time.
Oh, Twitter and LinkedIn. You guys all know I'm all big on LinkedIn. Twitter, you're way better than me, Rick. So see, we all have room to improve for sure. But ladies and gentlemen, huge thanks to Rick for joining us this morning. Huge thanks to all of you for joining us, for the comments, for the engagement. What an enlightening show. For me, I know I'm excited. I'm pumped. And now I'm thinking as somebody who can go out and help our consumers. So ladies and gentlemen, with that, we appreciate you. We love you. Make sure you join us tomorrow morning on the Shred Show. Now it's time for you to go shred. Go show up, hustle, repeat every day. See ya. See you, Rick. Hey, what's up, everybody? Thank you again so much for joining us for today's show. If you like the content, make sure you hit that like button below. And if you already haven't subscribed to our channel, click right over here and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want to see our latest video, click over here. And again, if you want to see the best of daily content within the mortgage and real estate industries, you have to subscribe now. We look forward to having you shred with us every single day.